Hi, I'm Greg Young, founder of A Head Full Wealth Management. And if you are a military retiree with a pension and a TSP account, I need to tell you something that might surprise you. Your TSP matters less than you think. It also matters more than you think. Now, I know that's a contradiction, but stay with me because by the end of this video, you're going to understand why having a pension fundamentally changes how sequence of return risk affects you, and why that change affects everything about how you think about your TSP allocation. Listen, most retirement advice that I read online is for the traditional retiree. Those are people that are 100% dependent on their portfolio from day one. That is not you. You have a pension, and that pension gives you something incredibly valuable, and that's flexibility. So today I'm going to show you the math behind why that flexibility matters, walk you through a real case study with a dual military couple, and I'm going to help you figure out when your TSP allocation is critical versus when you have more breathing room than you realize. So let's dive in. First, let's go ahead and talk about sequence of return risks. If you've never heard this term, it's basically just one of the hidden killers in retirement planning. What it means is that the order in which you experience investment returns matters just as much, sometimes more, than the average return itself. So we're going to look at these two portfolios on our screen, and what you'll see is Portfolio A and Portfolio B both average 7% per year over 30 years. So identical average returns. But Portfolio A, it crashes. It takes a huge loss in years 1 through 3 before it recovers. Now we're going to move that down the time horizon, and in Portfolio B, it's going to grow steadily for the first 10 years and then has a few down years later on. What happens is you have the same average return, but wildly different outcomes, as we can see here on this slide. The reason why is because when you're withdrawing money from your portfolio, which is what retirees do, you're selling shares. And if you're forced to sell shares when the market is down, you're locking in those losses, which takes a significant significant growth in order to recover from. Now, the technical term is sequence of return risk. The practical term is just retiring at exactly the wrong time. So let's think about a couple retiring in January of 2000. So right before the dot-com crash. If they had a portfolio then, their portfolio would drop 40% in the first 2 years of their retirement. Then it recovers. So that's not really remarkable. That's expected. Most markets recover. Unfortunately for them, the 2008 financial crisis hits, and by 2010, they've lived through 2 massive bear markets in their first decade of retirement. Now, think about somebody who retires in 2010 instead, right after the recovery started. That means that they caught the entire bull market from 2010 to 2020, the same investment strategy, but totally different experience. That, ladies and gentlemen, is sequence risk. And for most traditional civilian retirees, it's terrifying because they're 100% dependent on the performance of that portfolio from day one. But here's the thing. If you have a pension, that math changes completely. Let me show you why. Here's the typical civilian retiree. They've saved $1 million in their 401k, and that's incredible. That's a great benchmark, a huge feat of savings and discipline. So they get permission to retire at 65, and their Social Security doesn't start until full retirement age at 66.7 or 67 years old. So for now, we're going to go ahead and say it is safe for them to draw 4% per year from that portfolio. Making math easy, we're going to call it $40,000. Let's pretend that they draw it monthly. So month 1, they need $40,000 divided by 12. Month 2, same thing. Month 3, same thing. Every single month, they're going to sell shares to cover those expenses. So what happens if the market crashes in year 1 and they're selling at a loss? Now, they don't really have a choice. The bills don't stop just because the market went down. This is that nightmare scenario for sequence risk that oftentimes will either make people delay retirement, or it will make them spend significantly less than what they're used to, so take big hits to their lifestyle. And it's actually a limiting factor. I see some retirees try to live on exclusively their Social Security because they're afraid to take from their retirement funds that they've saved. Conversely, if we looked at the military retiree, we can say you retire as an 04. You hit 20 years, you get out, your pension is $60,000 per year, and you were also diligent and saved up $500,000 in your TSP. So that's a smaller portfolio than the $1 million household. But here's the critical difference. Your pension covers your baseline expenses. It's guaranteed. It shows up every month, and it doesn't matter if the market is up or down. So when do you need to touch your TSP? Maybe not for 10 years, maybe not for 20 years. Maybe you're working a second career and you don't need to touch it all the way until you're 65, 66. That flexibility is everything. That's huge. So we're going to do a little bit of math. Do the math with me. In scenario A over here, what we're seeing is the civilian retiree, $1 million portfolio. The market crashes 30% in year one. They still needed to withdraw $40,000, so they're selling that much worth of shares, and now it's worth 30% less, locking in those losses. By year 10, even if the market recovers, their portfolio is effectively devastated. Scenario B is our military retiree. $60,000 pension, plus $500,000 TSP to start, and we're going to tank the market in year one again. But this family is not touching the thrift savings plan. It's just sitting there, and it gets to recover. So by year 10, when they actually need to start withdrawals, the market is back, and they haven't locked in a single loss. So it's the same market crash, but a different outcome. That is what a pension or maybe even a VA disability is going to do for you. It's going to buy you some time. And investing, time is the most valuable asset that you can have. Let me show you how this plays out in real life. This is a household that I've worked with in my firm, and I want to introduce you to Marcus and Jennifer Hayes. They're a dual military couple. They both retired as commanders, or 04s. Ages 44 and 46, combined pensions equaled $95,000 per year. Their aggregate household thrift savings plan was $800,000. Here's the kicker. They both did not just retire, they went on to their honeymoon careers, and they both work civilian jobs now, making combined take-home of $180,000. So their total household income is $275,000. They've got 2 kids in middle school. Life is good. Thrift savings plan has been growing nicely. But Marcus, he asked me a question that's been bothering him, and he goes, Greg, what if the market crashed right now and we needed to take from this money? He said, I have $800,000 in there, and if it drops 40% like it did in 2008, we're looking at a $300,000 plus loss, and that terrifies me. So what I asked him was, when do you actually need this money? And after some thought, he comes back and he goes, well, we're both working. Our pensions cover the baseline expenses. We're not planning to touch TSP until 60, maybe 65. I said, 60, 65, well, that's 15 to 20 years before you need this money. And if the market crashes tomorrow, you have 15 years for it to recover. And historically, every market crash or correction recovers in 3 to 5 years. But the real insight there is because they have that pension and VA disability safety net plus their civilian income, they're just not withdrawal dependent. We can disconnect that fear, and you can delay withdrawals indefinitely if needed. That is the flexibility advantage. Now, does that mean that Marcus and Jen can just ignore their TSP allocations? No. There are still scenarios where it matters a lot. So here's 4 of them. And these 4, your allocation is critical. The first one is if you're planning to supplement your pension income before age 60, like gap years, maybe your pension doesn't cover that lifestyle and you need TSP withdrawals to bridge the gap. And in that case, sequence risk still applies. And I'm talking about like that gap before like Social Security kicks in. So if I retire at 60, I still have anywhere from 5 to 7 years before I turn on Social Security. Maybe my TSP is needed to make up the difference on just my base expenses. The second scenario is my pension doesn't cover my lifestyle at all. Some people retire at lower ranks, or they have expensive lifestyles that your pension just can't support. And if you're going to be withdrawal dependent, allocation matters. Third, if you're building a legacy for your heirs, if your goal is to pass wealth to your kids, so you're not going to spend it down anyway, growth matters. Again, that still means that your allocation is important. The last one I'm going to share with you today is if your healthcare costs spike beyond what your pension can absorb, you need to be considerate of your allocation. Look, TRICARE for Life is actually absolutely incredible, but it doesn't cover everything. If you end up with major out-of-pocket costs or sustained long-term care needs, you might actually need more from your TSP and earlier than you're planning. So in those scenarios, allocation matters a lot. But here are 4 scenarios where it matters less. So if you have a 20 plus year time horizon before withdrawals, like Marcus and Jennifer did, time solves all your problems. The second one is if your pension plus your income covers all your expenses, like if you're in a honeymoon career and your TSP is truly really never touch it money, you can afford to ride out volatility. Third, if you're not emotionally dependent, or if you are emotionally dependent on your account balances, some people check their TSP and their other accounts all the time, and this causes panic when it drops. If that's you, maybe you need a more conservative allocation and just create that peace of mind. And I know that we're all in this world of optimization, but I want to tell you that that is okay. The last one I'm going to share with you is if your second career income is stable and long-term and you're going to work for a good clip, your TSP has decades to grow without interruption. So for Marcus and Jennifer, we kept their TSP at 80% stock. And by stock, I mean the CS and I funds. They can afford the volatility. They're not going to touch it for a long time. The pension gives them that flexibility. Guess what? They sleep better at night now. They love understanding that math, which gives them that peace of mind. Here's the bottom line. If you're a military retiree with a pension, sequence or return risk affects you differently than affects the normal retiree. Not because the math is different, just because you have flexibility that they don't. Your pension buys you time, which is the ultimate risk reducer. Does that mean that you can ignore your allocation? No, that's not what I'm saying. What it does mean is that you might have more breathing room than you think. The question you need to ask yourself is this: when do I actually need this money? Because if the answer is not for 15 to 20 years, then you're in a fundamentally different situation than somebody that needs it next month. Look, this stuff is oftentimes very complicated or jargon heavy, and every family is unique. So if you're sitting there thinking, okay, Greg, but what about my situation? I'd love to chat with you. I work with military families, veterans, government employees that have all done okay but are ready for a second look. If that sounds like you, schedule an exploration meeting. The link's in the description. If you found this helpful, do me a favor. Like, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment below, and tell me what keeps you up at night about your TSP or some thoughts that you had about your allocation, and connect with me on LinkedIn. I post content like this as often as possible. I'm shooting for every week now. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.